All right, this week we are speaking with Dr. Jim Bohn. He is an organizational analyst working with organizations to improve their performance. And he is also known as the Blue Collar Scholar. So, Dr. Jim Bohn, thank you so much for taking time out your schedule to be here today.
Hey, thank you, Brian. I appreciate all the effort you put into this. The people on ChangeNerd are getting a lot of value out of the work you do.
Yeah, really, really appreciate that. So, Dr. Jim Bohn, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background.
Well, you asked about the blue collar scholar before. It was actually a name given to me when I was in a big OD conference one time. I told people that the majority of my work ethic came from my father, who could not even write his name. He actually signed his name with an X.
Mm,
But I learned how to work, how to push through things. In fact, in the white collar environment, I believe that the blue collar work ethic of just being persistent and dealing with things, it just helps. You'll take on bigger and bigger issues that other people might just step aside. Because with my dad, it was like, well, don't give me your excuses.
yeah,
But then I went and got a PhD. It took me 10 years in night school to do that. So I mentioned that in the story when I was being introduced, and somebody said, well, you're the blue collar scholar. I thought, well, that sticks.
yeah.
So I kind of held on to that ever since then. So I've been in change management for 25 years. Have written peer-reviewed research that you can find on Human Resource Development Journal. 4 books. I'm in the middle of a fifth. Have worked with organizations as wide-reaching as Shell Oil, Rogers Communications in Canada, Verizon, um, Goldman Sachs, Medical College of Wisconsin. I just a lot. I mean, it's too
Yeah,
much to mention. But
yeah,
what I find interesting, and this is probably one of my own taglines, is that products and services may be different, but all the change issues are the same. Doesn't matter what you do; they're all the same. If you're dealing with money or oil or consumer goods, the change issues are constant.
yeah. No, I definitely agree with you. So today's conversation is all about the three things that don't get enough attention in change management. So the first one, it's really around communication. We were talking about this a little bit before. Executives
hmm
are communicating about the change. So tell us more. What's your perspective?
Well, I think what happens, and Brian, I know you know this as well because of the people you've worked with.
Yeah.
Executives tend to put a lot of what I call corporate speak into their change rationale. And when people hear corporate speak, they almost completely disengage. They've heard all the goofy words before, like, let's get the low hanging fruit, this is our paradigm shift, all this nonsense. And instead, it would be better for executives to say, we're going to do this change because it will increase our customer satisfaction levels in the following 3 ways, or it will improve employee satisfaction in these specific ways, and give those specifics. People today are so overwhelmed with nonsense corporate speak, they blank it out. But if there's something that they hear that makes sense to them, like, you'll be able to get to your parking lot 15 minutes quicker if we do this change, that brings some motivation up.
Mhm.
Or you'll be able to uh, have both lines in the cafeteria and get through the cafeteria quicker. I know those are humble sort of methods or concepts, but
Yeah.
people gravitate to that as opposed to this non-stop flow of corporate speak that just drives people nuts. I actually did a workshop for the Medical College of Wisconsin a while ago. I talked about the notion of just get rid of corporate speak
Yeah.
because people get frustrated with it. They get frustrated with it.
Yeah. And why do you
So
think?
that's a big one.
Yeah. Well, why do you think it's so you know popular? Why can't we speak in simpler terms?
Well, I could give you the politically correct answer. I could give you the true answer. So I'll give you the true one because I think that's what you're looking for. I think
Yeah, that's
sometimes we're just
exactly what I'm
lazy.
looking for. Yeah.
I, and it's just like, well, I'll just float through this and give people a bunch of these words as opposed to the hard work of thinking something through. I mean, again, if I couldn't explain something to my dad, who was an amazing mechanic, but if I couldn't put it in language that he would understand, then I was failing. Because most of the changes that go on in our organizations are not for top level people. They receive the results of it, but the changes are going to happen at the ground level where the technicians are, where the customer service people are. where the frontline attendants are, and they want to know in plain language, why are we doing this? And the important part of that is then, well, they may not agree with it, but at least they understand it. As long as it's all this corporate speak stuff that we're too lazy to cipher through, people will say, here's just another thing that if I wait long enough, it'll go away.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. Totally agree. With teams that I've worked with before, and also executives that I've worked with before, I've also encouraged, everyone just to focus on the outcome, right? Because at the core of it, like communication is just an intervention, right? So are we trying to inform them? Do we want to ensure that they understand something? Do we need them to make a decision? Like what's the outcome that we're working towards, and then let's like reverse engineer the key messages to get there. So
Oh, I really like that idea of communication as an intervention. I've never thought about it that way before. That I'm going to steal that one from you. That's
no,
good.
no, man. Hey, look, leverage it, leverage it, leverage it, because and it's really, I don't know. I adopted this mindset from a boss I used to work under back in 2015. She was very intentional about interactions. I just remember working with her and adopting that philosophy. Every interaction should be designed not in a manipulative way, but in a way that really drives change, right? So
Hmm.
that's really cool. So the second thing that doesn't get enough attention is mid level management. So tell us, Jim, what's your perspective on that?
Well, it's a mid-level manager is like being the middle kid. I don't know where you line up in that,
Well, no, I'm the
but I
oldest.
was the middle. Okay, so see, the oldest one gets to beat on the middle one,
Yeah.
and then the middle one gets to get blamed on by the little kids. So I was the middle one, and I kind of look at the middle manager that way. It's kind of like, well, okay, the executives want me to do this stuff, and my people are asking me, what the heck am I doing this for? And if I mess it up, the executives are going to get angry at me. And if I don't have answers, the people that are working for me are going to think I'm a loser or lack credibility. So change leaders have to train those middle managers. They're the most important people, and they rarely get attention because the executives from above just sort of expect, well, just go fix this or go do it, do the Nike thing, just do it.
Hmm.
And the people down below are going, okay, here you are again with another one of these crazy things. But if you train them well, let them know a good rationale, make sure that they have all the support that they need, that they've got a backup line, they've got frequently asked questions they can get to, regular communication interventions like you just mentioned, and making sure that they're cared for, the change is going to go dramatically better. If you leave them alone, they're going to end up saying the following thing that nobody wants to hear, and that's this: corporate is making us do this. And that is a kiss of death and change because the people down below say, well, that leader lacks credibility, and that's just sort of an excuse. If the leader says, I know why we're doing this, we may not all like it, but this train is leaving the station. But as long as we're all on board, let's figure out how we're going to manage it together. That helps the leader, builds their credibility, which by the way is critical during changes, to build the credibility of the leader, not erode it. And the other part of it is it gives them the strength to answer questions that they want to answer. They have them. Their team trusts them more, which is huge in
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
And so, change leaders in your work plan ensure that those middle managers get attention immediately. They know how to get answers, and they're going to be part of a regular communication intervention. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim, with the mid-level management, um, I've been part of different, change initiatives where the mid-level management got all the attention, but the executives didn't quite role model the right behaviors, and so you saw this imbalance. Have you experienced that before in your line of work?
I have, and I don't know that there's anything specific that I would say that you can do to fix that. There's a couple of reasons why that happens. I believe the biggest one is what I call organizational attention deficit disorder. Executives are so busy doing so many things, they're on to the next thing before they even press the email send on the change. But
I would agree.
that does not preclude the leaders in those mid-level positions from getting stronger as leaders, not blaming their executive management, because remember, they have a career path they're building. And anytime I blame the people above me, I look weak. if I just say, we're working on this together, even the executives will say those people are getting the job done. They'll get the attention that they need. There's nobody's going to walk down the hall and tell a chief executive officer, you're not leading this change or walking the talk. That would be career suicide. We know that, but that does not mean that these mid-level managers don't still need to get trained, have the rationale, and have the answers. They can still look good. They can still manage through it. And for them to try to articulate to their people that maybe the upper level executives are not doing this, not a wise idea. It's just to say what we're doing right now is getting this change done and be focused on that. That's far more professional than blaming somebody. Blaming never works well in leadership. It just makes us all look weak. I've done it, and then the next day it's like, well, that was really stupid that I did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And then the third thing that doesn't get enough attention is really around resistance. So give us your perspective on that one.
Well, resistance is a funny thing. I've been in about a 2-year study on resistance, and partly because of a new book I'm writing on organizational level engagement. And resistance is often just seen as coming from the people at the line level. But that assumes that the people at the top and the middle know what they're doing. So one of the things that I ask change leaders to do is to find ways to remessage or repurpose things that are probably causing resistance. Let me give you an example of that.
Mhm.
Just having an upper level executive say, just do it,
Right.
that's organizational extortion. I mean, that's not a good thing. So change leaders, even if you can't find a way to prevent some of those executives from, putting out messaging that is strong, again, get to those mid-level managers and say, we'll figure this out together. What happens, though, is when we go back to things like I said before, where we're blaming upper management for doing this change, or we're not providing enough input to the people who are trying to lead the change, or we're not giving answers to people, those communication interventions you talked about, or giving them a feedback loop if something's going wrong, that stuff creates resistance. There's 2 reasons that people resist.
Mhm.
This is real important. These are based in human motivation.
Yeah.
The first one is incompetence. Now, that can be fixed. People are afraid when they change. I'll give you a quick example. My father-in-law was a lineman for an electric company for 40 years. The guy could go out in 60-mile-an-hour winds, snowstorms, doesn't matter. When he got too old to do that, they put him in an office, and they did not train him effectively, and within 9 months he was gone because they put him in a spot where he simply was not trained to do the work he was doing, and he felt incompetent. Nobody likes to feel incompetent. So there's ways that we can ensure that during change, we don't build incompetence, because incompetence will build resistance. Because neither you, Brian, nor I want to feel stupid.
Yeah.
And when we're putting people in a spot where, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I've got customers on the line, they're yelling at me, or I'm a technician in the field and I can't give people answers. That just builds resistance. The other part of resistance, though, and this is much smaller. I mean, if you did a bell curve,
Mhm.
there's a certain group of people who are literally unwilling to do the change because they might be discovered. And that, if you find that situation, it could have, I've got some wild stories on that one. If you find people who say, I don't want any help, I don't want to learn anything, I don't want to be assisted, you got to dig a little deeper, because there may be something else behind that. It may not be incompetence. It may be they want to hold on to some data that they have. They think their job's too important. Um, and those things, candidly, good leaders change that out and just say, we need to have you on board. Otherwise, we need to reassign you. Or there can be things as I've even seen one guy doing money laundering, and he didn't want to have that found out.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like, I asked him, I said, well, how can I help you? And this is after I did 100 structured interviews across the United States, face to face, just like I'm doing with you. And I said, how can I help you? And he said, you can leave us alone. I thought, well, that's odd. So there's incompetence, but there's also an unwillingness. And I think good change leaders can find out where those folks are.
Yeah.
One other thing about resistance that I would say that good change leaders can use is they're not wise to use the most influential people in an organization. And I'm not talking about people at the executive level. I'm talking about people that have incredible influence. Maybe they've been there 20, 30 years. They've got multiple patents. They've got an incredible salary. They've got a track record that just won't quit. And when those people are in a room and you haven't talked with them ahead of time, and I know you're smiling because you get it,
Yeah.
they're going to go like this. And if those people have not been brought on board and they say this will never work, the rest of the room will look at them and you're done. You're done. So finding those people who have incredible resistance. Some of the projects I worked on, I would look for the person that I knew was going to be the most resistant. I would travel out to them. I'd sit with them face to face. I'd have lunch or coffee and say, what are you most concerned about? Because what will happen, what they're looking for at that point, Brian, is respect. And
Yep.
if you give them that, even if they don't like what you're doing, they'll say, well, I get it. Then you bring them on board. They're the most powerful people in the organization to advocate a project
Yep.
because people will look to them. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah,
So
no,
those are the things that I would look at. Yeah.
I get it. So this is what's funny. I haven't done any research on this specifically, but what I've noticed just in my own career and in speaking with my network, after about the third or fourth year of being at an organization, you find yourself solving the same problem. It may look different, it may sound different, but ultimately it's the same problem. So the
Oh
value
yeah.
of going to the people with the longest amounts of tenure is that they've seen a technology implementation done within the company before.
Hmm.
Sure, it was
Exactly.
right. It might have been under a different name, right? Maybe it wasn't moving to the cloud or whatever, but they've been through a technology implementation. They've been through a restructure. They've been through globalization of some sort. So you're
Yep.
absolutely
Yep.
right. Showing that respect and getting them to kind of contribute their lessons learned. That I think that would go a great way as well.
And think if you just meet them with them one on one, say, look, the train is going to leave this station, but most importantly, I just want to talk to you one on one to make sure I understand where you're at so that we can have you as a leader to support this. I would get those people on conference calls and have them talk about the change. Nobody listens to corporate, we know that, but they will listen to their peers,
Yeah.
mostly because their peers are out in the field doing the same kind of work they're doing. They've got respect. They've,
Yep.
again, got patents and all this stuff. And getting them to advocate for you is the hugest influential lever you can get in a corporation. And at the end of the day, they'll appreciate that you asked them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I forget who I was speaking to, but something else that has been like kind of proven to work is identifying people with the most cross-functional relationships. So these are people,
Excellent.
right? These are people maybe it could be an HR business partner, a finance business partner, right? Someone who has been with the organization, enough, who already has that credibility. In fact, their role almost demands that level of credibility because they're working across the
Exactly.
enterprise, right? Those, if you can get those people on board early, they've been proven to really drive influence in your change initiatives as well.
They're just so big, and because influence and change is it's an invisible lever, but if you have that lever working for you, and something goes south, they may be angry, they may get frustrated, but at least they'll say, well, here's what I think you need to do to correct it. But keeping them on your side is going to go much further than any PowerPoint, any executive speak, any HR stuff. It's like, you know what? Brian is advocating for this change, and Brian knows what's going on. Brian's been around for a long time. What does Brian have to say? Brian says, well, we've got some problems here, but we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge.
That is huge. That is huge. So Jim, I want to highlight two books that I know that you wrote. One in February 2016, Architects of Change. What was that book about?
Well, again, I try to boil it down into terms that make sense to everyday people. But it's also for executives because executives get the idea of architect, the idea that you have a green field that you're going to dig into, you're going to put a foundation in there, you're going to add superstructure, you're going to add details, and the building isn't finished until you put the capstone on and you can open the door.
Mm-hmm.
An architect is a perfect analogy for a change leader. And I also, within that book, give very specific things that people need to do. Lots of leaders get very frustrated with the following thing. They get tired of the change management speak. We have to be careful of it. We create our own problem by walking in the room
Yeah,
and giving them a bunch of words that they don't get. Now, we like to talk about, I love talking shop with you because we'll get
yeah,
it,
yeah,
but they don't want to hear, they don't want to hear that stuff. So I gave some very specifics on that and show them step by step what they need to do to get stuff done based on the many implementations that I worked on and literally the thousands of people that I've worked with.
awesome, awesome. And then the second book, September 2017, Getting IT Right. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, getting IT right. This is a leader's guide for installing the organizational app. What I did is I took architects of change into the realm of like an SAP implementation, an ERP implementation, Oracle implementation. I worked as a change leader in 5 major implementations, and that is the hardest work any organization will ever do. So, based on a lot of work that I did with people around the world,
Yeah,
I put again very clear steps, just as precise as I possibly could, about the things that need to be done to put one of those installations in place. It was endorsed by the CIO of Comfort Systems USA, who read the book. I did some work with him for a big IT change. And along with other IT people who read it and gave me their feedback and input. So it's
yeah,
just very specific things. And candidly, I think if a change leader is going to go into a big change like that, just having an executive read that book, it's probably all of 100 pages, but it's so precise on the things that need to get done. It removes all of the corporate speak and gets into what they have to do to get the right team in place, who they have to select, making sure that they have a communication leader in place and why, all the granular details. It's been very, very popular with executives who are just trying to figure out what do I have to do here? And also, I think for change leaders that have never done a change like this before,
yeah, yeah.
reading through that book is good. It's a big eye opener because you and I both know those are brutal changes, but if they're done well from the beginning, they can be really, really great for an organization.
No, you're absolutely, absolutely right. And then, Jim, if you don't mind, can you kind of give us a preview of your new book? What is this book about?
Oh, I'm so fired up. I did my PhD in organizational efficacy. I was the first PhD in the world to design an instrument to measure organizational level engagement. Uh, it, uh, it's been reviewed by people in Russia, been used in Italy, it's been used in Suzhou, China, it's been used in Amsterdam. What it does is it analyzes organizations differently than employee engagement. Employee engagement is old, it's tired. You see so much stuff out on LinkedIn about employee engagement, but it's really not going anywhere. What I did is wrote a book that shows people looking out. In other words, instead of me and my desk and my boss and my uh, money,
Yeah,
let's take a look at how is the organization doing. Do we know where we're going? Can we work together? Do we communicate effectively? I'm going to add intervention, stealing that from you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Are we resilient in the face of obstacles? And the biggest one of all is, do we hold people accountable for what they're doing? And if we do, that also includes good things like recognition, good reward systems. And this has all been validated statistically. I mean, I've worked really hard on it, so I'm working on it right now, but I'm fired up about it. It really is the step beyond employee engagement.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Employee engagement is important, but I do feel like we need to focus on something more broader. So I'm looking forward to reading your next book. So Jim, we talked about a number of things. What's the one thing you would love for someone to take away from this conversation?
Speak practically. Bring your change language into practical language. People will thank you for it. Don't use the change management monikers and tools and techniques outside of when we talk shop. We're all friends here. We love this stuff. But
Yeah,
for most people, they don't get it. They don't like to. They don't like to talk to accountants about accounting. They don't like to talk to lawyers about lawyering stuff. They don't even like to talk to HR people about HR stuff per se. What people are looking for is clear, plain language about why we're doing what we're doing. And if you do that, they're going to grow. They'll have more trust in you. that you're not using corporate speak. You're using plain language. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. Sometimes I think we have to have this highfalutin language to sort of sound impressive. Absolutely categorically wrong. People want to hear things in plain language, and that'd be the best advice I can give you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, Dr. Jim Bohn, thank you so much for carving time out your schedule to be here and have this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. And can you tell the audience where can they find you?
You can find me at drjimbone.com. You can find me out on Amazon, my multiple books we talked about, and you can find me on my podcast, which calls Getting the Job Done. Um, those are a couple of areas. Also on Twitter at drjimbone.com.
Awesome, awesome. All right, Jim, thank you so much for your time.
Brian, my pleasure. Really enjoyed talking with you.
All right.